Welcome back to our public meeting today, in which we are reviewing proposals that have had a public hearing already and have returned with revised designs in response to commissioners' comments made at those public hearings. The next two items are actually an exception to that. They are applications for advisory reports for work in Central Park. And under a long-standing protocol, all advisory applications for work in scenic landmarks that are not eligible for staff level review and that do not also do not significantly alter the original landscape design are reviewed at an LPC public meeting, followed by review by the Public Design Commission, which has binding jurisdiction. And so a public hearing on these proposals will be held by the Public Design Commission in the near future. And so our work today is advisory, and our comments will be forwarded to the Public Design Commission for their process. And so with that, Corey.
Can we just confirm, sorry, pardon me, can we confirm that the YouTube video is actually working? Because on mine, it doesn't seem to be moving forward. Does anyone, hold on. Can somebody check?
I'm checking,
Rich,
Mark.
Okay.
It's working for me.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, it's working for me as well.
Okay.
Great. So Corey, we will move now to the next two items.
Yes, and I'll read both of them in at the same time. Items number 5 and 6, both applications for advisory reports in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1111, Lot 1. First is LPC 20-09776. This is Central Park, the Conservatory Garden, scenic landmark. A garden designed in 1937 by Gilmore D. Clark within the northeast section of Central Park, an English romantic style public park designed by in 1856 by Olmsted and Vaux. The application is to remove steps, replace walls, and install barrier-free access ramps. The second application is LPC 20-09638. Central Park, a pathway leading to the dairy, also Central Park scenic landmark. A pathway leading to a Victorian Gothic style building designed by Calvert Vaux and built in 1871 within the southern section of Central Park, an English romantic style public park, again designed in 1856 by Olmsted and Vaux. The application is to alter the path, replace paving, and install a barrier-free access ramp.
And commissioners, the applicant has joined the meeting and you may begin. Please state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, commissioners. I hope everyone is well. I'm Christopher Nolan, the Chief Landscape Architect of the Central Park Conservancy, and I'm here today to present two projects.
All right, Chris, I'm sorry. I just have to open the proceedings. So hold on 1 minute. Okay, Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that? All right, Commissioner Holford Smith. Oops, I can't unmute. Okay, Commissioner Chapin, would you second that?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, now please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So good afternoon, commissioners. I hope everybody is well. I'm Chris Nolan of the Central Park Conservancy. I'm the Chief Landscape Architect, and I'm here to present these two projects that address accessibility. First at the Conservatory Garden, the north end of the park, and secondly at the Dairy, the park's main visitor center in the south end. Both projects are connected to larger restoration efforts being reviewed at staff level. Gain control.
You can click on the slide and you have control now.
Thank you. First at the Conservatory Garden. The garden is the park's only formal garden space, built in the mid-1930s on the site of a late 19th century conservatory designed by Gilmore Clark and Betty Sprout, as said. 3 distinct garden rooms: the central Italian garden, the English garden to the south, and the French garden to the north. The garden is internationally known for its horticulture, established in the early 1980s by restoration of the Conservancy, led by our trustee Lyndon Miller. The scope of the 80s restoration work was almost entirely horticultural, and the garden's infrastructure, pavements date to the original construction or a major repair project in 1966 by the New York City Parks Department. The scope of the larger project includes modernization of all the drainage infrastructure and restoration of the pavements. The 3 garden rooms are universally grade accessible, except for the French garden to the north. Its sunken central room, defined by sloped display beds, the classic parterres, and the beloved Untermeyer fountain. The proposal is to create universal access to the central space, maintaining the symmetry and balance of the existing design. The garden's primary design element is horticulture. The French garden room is defined by this outer ilex hedge along the perimeter with 4 points of access through it. Each point of access is defined by climbing roses supported by a nondescript steel trellis. Each of the 4 locations have low cheek walls and 4 steps down to the lower elevation. There's approximately 20 to 24 inches of grade change between the outer path and the inner room. The plant bed, inclusive of the ilex hedge, is approximately about 22 feet wide. With some modest regrading of this outer path, really no more than 3 to 4 inches, we're able to create an accessible ramp along the 22-foot length of this here, along the plant bed. The existing rose trellis with the roses and the cheek walls will remain, with extensions to the outer edge and extensions to the inner edge to retain the grade. I'm sorry, it's a little slow in the click. The existing cheek walls will remain the same. It essentially extends back to the outer edge of the ilex hedge with a 12-inch step down to a lower cheek wall to match the existing grade of the plant bed with a straight line grade with the trellis overhead. It's really very clear in section. I'm sorry. The existing condition, the outer ilex hedge, the roses on the trellis, the existing cheek wall, and the 4 steps. The curb length along the plant bed. Our proposal extends the existing cheek wall out essentially at pavement elevation to the outer edge of the ilex hedge, maintains the existing wall with the steel trellis and roses, a 12-inch step down to a modest little cheek wall here, which is level like the existing one out to the edge of the pavement along the plant bed with a straight line ramp between 2. Simple steel handrails will be installed on both sides of the ramp to be compliant. The second project is an creating accessible access to the east side of the dairy. The dairy was an early restoration. The path to the east is too steep without interim landings, and the crosswalk here on the closed east drive, which leads down to Grand Army Plaza, one of the main entrances of the park, is also has an uncomfortable geometry to the access point, and it's also not accessible. Its slopes are incorrect. The early restoration project of the Conservancy, where we recreated this loggia. The loggia was recreated in the 1980s restoration. The geometry of the path was reconstructed in the 1980s, but the geometry and the width of the path is essentially as it was historically. The existing condition of the path is 14 feet wide. It matches the threshold into the loggia. The straight line grade is as it was historically. It is our intent to actually maintain that 14-foot wide width and maintain the straight line grade. We have in many other locations in the park and creating accessibility, created interim ramps. The path is actually too steep without interim landings at 30 feet with handrails on both sides. We have done that in other locations on landscape paths, but in this instance, we believe it's really critical to maintain the historic width that matches the threshold, the uniform grade as it was historically. And by modifying this curve of the path, the radius of the path, we can actually create enough room on the north side, dividing the 2 paths with a small concrete stone curb to allow an accessible route on the north side. in plan view. The slope coming down is too steep without interim landings at 30 foot. You would need handrails on both sides. Again, by modifying this radius, we pull the path just slightly south, about 1.5 feet. It allows us about 3.5 feet encroachment on the existing plant bed, which is essentially a buffer planting to the transverse road to create an accessible ramp, dividing the two diverging slope paths between the two with a 9-inch granite curb. We also are proposing to relocate this crosswalk a little to the south. It allows for it to be made accessible and create a better geometry in relationship to the access path. The proposed design, maintaining the straight line grade, same width as it meets the dairy loggia. That allows us moving the path about 18 inches to the south. We gain 3.5 feet to the north, separated by this 9-inch curb, where this is the ramp with landings and handrails on both sides, and this is the straight line grade. The geometry of the path actually, like it was historically, essentially remains the same and does not break the pavement, does not break the plane of the front face of the dairy. The heavy line weights actually really show the changes in the geometries of the paths. Again, slightly modified to the south. That allows us to separate the two with that curb, pushing the path, the accessible ramp, I should say, to the north side with handrails, and a reconfiguration of this crosswalk on the closed east drive to create a great accessible route and really a cleaner geometry of the two. In elevation, it's really quite clear. The outside edge of the path, existing path at 14 feet as it meets the loggia, separated by a 9-inch curb, maintaining a uniform curb reveal on the outside of the path, the double handrails, and the great accessible ramp as it approaches the dairy. And again, this outside edge of the path doesn't break the front face of the facade of the dairy. The last element of the proposal is the replacement of the hex pavers underneath the loggia, which were installed in the 1980s restoration with brick. We were able to locate an 1870s annual report reference, which clearly indicated that the brick banding underneath the loggia, the field was actually once brick. It is our intent to replace the hex pavers from the 1980s with a herringbone pattern of brick. There we go. Just a simple field. There's precedent throughout the park, particularly in the upper terrace of Bethesda, where panels of herringbone brick are divided, or I should say panels of bluestone, the fields are herringbone brick. And that's both proposals. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. And we do have a question from Commissioner Gustafson. Please
Yeah,
go ahead.
in the conservatory garden, am I to understand that all 4 of those stairway entrances are going to be changed?
That is our intent, to replace all 4 uniformly, yes. We thought
Why?
really it's driven by 2 reasons. One, that the highly symmetrical nature of the French garden, all 4 points of entry are the same. To create a uniform design to the access points, uniform experience also. It's also, that also aligns with the goal of making it universal. It also obviates the need for any signage to direct people to the actual one that is accessible. We thought it was kind of in keeping that the steps as designed are not primary design elements, it's really the horticulture, and these are just points of access down there, and it creates a uniform approach.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chapin, followed by Commissioner Devonshire.
Yes, I wanted to ask about whether there are any further plans for the conservatory gardens. You referred to a staff review of some other elements, and I just wondered if you have further plans for the area. That's question 1. The second question is really about the bluestone and whether you're able to retain and reuse some of it, or what the situation is with regard to replacement, getting a good match for the bluestone. Thank you.
It is our intent that the plans are to replace, remove, reinstall as much of the existing bluestone as we possibly can. Much of it is actually, there has been unit replacement over the years since we've been around since the 1980s.
Yeah.
It's New York State Bluestone. We have access to quarries and relationship with quarries that provide good matches. So we will do unit replacement as necessary in resetting those pavements.
And on the other matter, Chris?
In terms of the scope of the other work being reviewed at staff level, it's comprehensive removal and reinstallation of the bluestone paving. There's reinstallation of bluestone paving that was lost in the 1966 restoration. There's repair work to the some of the retaining walls, some repointing, some structural repair or steel repair to the pergola. All of it's in kind, and most of the work is below grade and reconstruction of the drainage infrastructure, modernization of the electric and the water services going in.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Devonshire, followed by Commissioner Jefferson.
Thank you, Sarah. My question was about justification for trashing the bluestone. I didn't see any that looked like it had to be in the photographs, and I'm wondering if you did. I mean, at this point in the design, you should have done a condition assessment to know how much that you're going to replace, not have it be a general, we're going to save as much as possible.
Commissioner, we have done that. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but we have done that. I mean, just from a costing perspective and a historic fabric perspective, is our intent to save as much of that as possible. I could certainly provide that for you, later.
Thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson.
Yes, I have two questions about the ramp. If you could go to the image of the plan of the ramp.
This is for the dairy, Commissioner?
The
or-
dairy,
Yes.
the dairy.
Okay.
Do you need the curb for the handrail?
Yes, the curb, this path, the actual path that leads up is a straight line grade with no interim landings. This has a straight line slope, which is different than the ramp itself. The ramp actually slopes it in 12, so you'll have interim landings and you'll need that curb to essentially moderate between those diverging.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, any other questions? Okay, not seeing any questions right now. Rich, I believe that we did receive some written comments which were shared with the commissioners, but will you note them for the record?
Yes, we received resolutions in support from Community Ward 7 and letters of opposition from 2 individuals, Historic Districts Council, Victorian Society, and Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts.
Okay, thank you. All right, and again, all of those letters have been distributed and shared with the commissioners. Any final questions for the applicant? Okay, so let's move into our discussion. And we have 2 applications before us. So as we discuss it, let's start with the Conservatory Garden, and then while you're just giving your comments on that one, just right away give your comments on the alteration to the path to the dairy to create an ADA ramp. So we'll do comments, each one of you will do comments on both applications. Just start with the Conservatory and then Garden and then the ramp. Okay, and Commissioner Chapin, why don't we start with you?
Okay, I'm just you're starting with a Conservatory Garden, so
Yeah.
That's actually the only concern I have, which is the same concern which was raised by one of the other commissioners. Do we really have to do all 4 pieces? Excuse me, Sarah, I have to cut off for a minute. Can you take some other
Okay.
people?
Of course,
Thank
yes.
you.
Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith, why don't you start then?
Sure. I had a similar sort of question about why we were doing all 4 of the ramps in the Conservatory Garden. But I do understand the symmetry, and I think it'd be preferable to not have to have signage directing people to an accessible route if they could all be accessible. So think that I'm okay with changing all 4 of them.
Okay,
And in principle, I think it's fine, but I agree that obviously all bluestone that can be reused should be reused. And the dairy, I think it's a good plan. I have no objection to it.
okay, great, thank you. And Commissioner Gustafson?
I take the opposite point of view on the 4 accessible ramps. Each ramp requires handrails and requires the extension of the wall and the replacement of bluestone. My feeling is that we picked the most convenient approach for those who need the accessible ramp, and that's the one that they use. I have no problem with adding wayfinding if we need to do that. We do that throughout the city and parks and other places throughout the city. So I don't think there's a need to take out all 4 of those entrances.
Okay, and on the ramp to the dairy?
Ramp to the dairy, I'm fine with it, as I think they did a fine job. My only concern is, as the other commissioners have expressed, is that I don't. There's a qualitative difference between the existing bluestone and bluestone that you use to replace it, so to the extent possible, it should be retained.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
On the northern part, the garden, I think symmetry is so important. It makes that place so dramatic. So I agree with the proposal. On the dairy, I think it's reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with that.
All right, Commissioner Lutfi.
I actually think this is a good, this is a thoughtful and good plan. I think in the ideal world, it would be nice on the conservatory garden if there was one entrance that just ran through to the other side. But I could approve ramps on all sides. And I think the dairy is a very good plan.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Bland?
Yeah, I wish that conversion to ADA accessible places could be made so beautiful and so easily done as both of these are. I support all 4 in the conservatory gardens being replaced, partly because of the very minimal changes that are necessary to the historic cheek walls. So I think that's fine. And the other aspect, of course, is that it just makes it all so clear and easy for everybody, and no wayfinding. And the dairy is just a great scheme, and changes minutely a few inches of paths, but basically keeps the same feeling. So I think both are really well done. And I just want to compliment Chris and his team on the beautiful drawings, as well as of course the design itself.
Okay. Commissioner.
Okay, standard marketing stuff.
All right, Commissioner Devonshire. Sorry, I skipped Commissioner Chen. Let me go to Commissioner Chen and then Commissioner Devonshire.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Bland and Lefty and Jefferson. I think the ADA accessibility is minimal, and I agree with the approach of the symmetry and the design is as is. I find it appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Devonshire.
I believe that I'm not in favor of 4 ramps. One, there is an experiential thing that happens when you step gradually down into that garden. I believe that a symmetry can be achieved by changing out 2 of them, not all 4. By changing all 4 to ramps, you're actually doubling the size of the cheek walls. And when you're standing at the outside of that garden, it would be very easy to identify which of those elements were ramps because you would see the handrails. And so I'm not in favor of changing out 4. I would be in favor of changing out 2. I think the dairy path is fine.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Thank you. My first thought was to suggest what Michael just suggested, but my problem with that is that the approaches to the site are, I mean, you have a visual approach, you can see it from the sidewalk or looking down on it, and you can also see it, you approach it axially along the short direction. So the question is which ramps would bring, because if you do 2 and not 4, you're going to have asymmetry one way or the other. What I would suggest is do the 4 ramps, but don't modify the cheek walls. Let the experience of the ramp be as subtle and minimal as possible, and just confine the ramp to the width of the space between the cheek walls, and have the railings, which are shown as not hitting into the cheek walls, remain that way, and have the bluestone kind of continue as it does. I think that would be preferable to me, but I have no problem with it, and I have no problem with the dairy proposal.
All right, thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, will come back to you.
Thank you. I'll start with the dairy at this point. I think it's a fine solution. I think it was very well done. I actually think that the way that the handicapped access is achieved in the conservatory gardens is also very well done in general. Though I like Commissioner Goldblum's suggestions just now as a way to decrease the visual impact, because I do have a lot of concern about changing, as Commissioner Devonshire did, the way this is going to appear in terms of the geometries by altering all of the, and I was against altering all of the pathways, but perhaps Commissioner Goldblum's suggestions could make the visual impact of changing this less. I do agree with Commissioner Devonshire in a way that, walking down on the steps is a somewhat different experience, but maybe it's, I'm more concerned about the geometries, I think, and I think that perhaps Commissioner Goldblum's suggestion could help mitigate that.
Okay, thank you. And I again, I agree with everyone on the dairy. I think that the geometry of the path is largely retained. It's just a little wider to accommodate the ramp, which is, I think it will be a very graceful and seamless way to integrate barrier-free access there. And for the conservatory garden, I actually think that the geometries of these approaches are really important to the formality of the garden design. And so the steps themselves to me are a little bit less important. So I would support all 4 ramps in the interest of symmetry and maintaining that formality. But we'll make a motion that will include all of our comments today so that they can all be shared with the Public Design Commission. So I will go ahead and do that myself.
Sarah?
Yeah.
If I may make one more comment, as a homeowner in Brooklyn with a bluestone sidewalk in front of my house, and a homeowner of a Dutch house upstate with a bluestone sidewalk in front of it, I would posit this: on a snowy or rainy day, being able to walk down steps is a lot safer than being able to walk down a bluestone ramp, because bluestone gets slick when it's wet. And we've got a public safety issue here to deal with as well.
Okay, I'll add that into it as well. Okay. All right, so in the matter of, let me just find the conservatory garden. Okay, in the matter of docket number LPC 20-09776, Central Park, the Conservatory Garden in a scenic landmark, a garden designed in 1937 by Gilmore D. Clark within the northeastern section of Central Park, an English romantic style public park designed in 1856 by Olmsted and Vaux. This is an application to remove steps, replace walls, and install barrier-free access ramps. And I note that the Conservatory Garden is a formal garden consisting of 3 sections, including a French-style northern garden, an Italianate-style central garden, and an English-style southern garden. And I recommend that we issue a report making the following findings: that the proposed work will provide barrier-free access throughout the northern section of the Conservatory Garden, that the removal of the simply designed stairs and lengthening of the cheek walls will not eliminate any significant architectural features, that the replacement of the stairs at the pathways will maintain could maintain symmetry of the composition, a significant feature of the garden design, and that the proposed ramps and modified walls will not bisect the adjoining pathways, and the walls will feature a stepped profile, thereby helping them to be well integrated into the overall design and consistent with the simple geometric forms of the garden's framing and hardscaping. That the ramps will match the adjoining pathways in terms of material and finish, helping to unify the composition. That the railings will be simply designed and typical in terms of size, material, and finish, thereby helping them to remain a discrete and harmonious presence. And that the proposed work will support the significant historic and naturalistic character of this scenic landmark. But I also do want to note that we had a number of commissioners comment on the number of the ramps and ask that the applicants and the Public Design Commission study the need for 4 ramps or studying the extent of the changes to the cheek walls. And we also note that the bluestone material be explored in terms of its safety for a ramp, and that in the reconstruction and restoration plans that all historic bluestone that can be salvaged and saved be retained and only replaced as necessary. And I think that covers it. So Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, and Rich, will you call the vote?
Yes. Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Letfi.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor, none opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, so we've that's approves.
Did you call John? Did you call John?
Yes.
Yeah.
You did.
Sorry.
Okay. All right, so we will be
Thanks,
issuing
Dad.
we'll be issuing a positive report for that, but noting some of the comments that some of the commissioners did make. All right, and Commissioner Chapin, will you make the second motion?
Yes, thank you. In the matter of the Borough of Manhattan LPC 20-09638, an advisory report for Central Park, a pathway leading to the Dairy Central Park scenic landmark. A pathway leading to a Victorian Gothic style building designed by Calvert Vaux and built in 1871 within the southern section of Central Park, an English romantic style public park designed in 1856 by Olmsted and Vaux. Application is to alter the path, replace paving, and install a barrier-free access ramp. I recommend issuing a positive report finding that the proposed work will help provide barrier-free access without eliminating or damaging any significant historic, architectural, or landscape features, that the slight shifting and widening of the pavement and regrading will help provide the minimum clearances necessary for a barrier-free access path and a pathway which can be accessed by emergency vehicles. That the composition will help maintain an alignment of the dairy's porte cochere, the covered porch, and the wider pathway in keeping with the historic approach to the dairy. that the paired pathways will utilize a curvilinear footprint and materials and finishes typical of pathways throughout the surrounding parkland, thereby helping them to remain a harmonious presence. That the paired pathways, when seen at a distance, will visually recall the appearance of a typical single pathway, thereby helping them remain a discrete presence in landscape vistas. That the railings and curbing will be simply designed and typical in terms of materials and finishes. That the new brick paving will match the historic paving in terms of placement and materials. That the pattern and color of the historic brick paving is not known. That the proposed brickwork paving will match historic paving elsewhere in the park in terms of color and pattern, thereby helping the paving to be consistent with the character of the park. And that the proposed work will support the significant historic and naturalistic character of this scenic landmark.
Okay, and Commissioner Goldblum, will you second that motion?
I second.
Okay, Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Okay, 10 in favor, none opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, so that is also approved and we'll issue a positive report for that application as well. All right, we'll move on to the next item.
Okay, it's actually going to be the last presentation of the day. It is 2 items that I'll read in together. Both concern 4500 Arthur Kill Road, the Kreischer House individual landmark in Borough of Staten Island, block 7465, lot 115. First is item 7, LPC 20-01986, an application for a modification of use in bulk. This is an application to request that the Landmarks Preservation Commission issue a report to the City Planning Commission relating to an application for a modification of use pursuant to section 74.711 of the zoning resolution. And the second is item 8, LPC 19-14497, an application for a certificate of appropriateness. This application is to install a barrier-free access lift and to construct new buildings situated on the landmark site. In case I forgot to describe it, this is a stick-style residence designed by Polisser and Polisser and built in circa 1888. And just to summarize Commissioner comments from the last time this was presented, there was a consensus of support for the general development concept, where most of the proposed new buildings are situated outside of the landmark site. Some commissioners had concerns about the height of the new buildings and the distance between the new buildings and the individual landmark. A few commissioners were concerned about the visibility of the individual landmark being impacted by the presence of new buildings from a particular vantage point, which will be shown. And lastly, the commissioners were concerned about the parking area close to the individual landmark and wanted more information and consideration of the landscaping features throughout, including retention of existing trees, placement of new trees and shrubs, and the treatment of the retaining wall along the front of the site. The applicant team will present their response to those comments after we open the proceedings.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Yes, second.
Okay, all in favor of opening the proceedings, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the applicants may now speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I thank you for the opportunity to represent this project at 4500 Arthur Kill Road, Staten Island, New York.
Okay, Mr. Victorio, can you speak a little closer to the microphone?
I sure can.
Okay, thank you.
Is that better?
Yes, it's a little better.
Okay. All right, so let me.
Hey, Ron, can you start from the beginning? We can't hear you at all.
You can't hear me at all. Okay.
Very hard.
Let me see if I can raise my mic volume for you.
Is this a Wellington issue? Wellington, what did you have to do?
There's the Zoom has a button that it says it will automatically adjust the volume for you. And once it do that, no matter how much you raise the volume, it will remain very low and muted. So check the Zoom box volume audio test area. You will see there's a checkbox.
I'm doing that. I'm in the process of doing that now.
You can do an audio test under Zoom, and you will see that underneath it, it has a tricky little thing that the system takes over your volume control regardless of how loud you set the microphone.
Hello? Is that louder now?
It's a little bit louder.
A little bit. Oh, do the best you can. We want to make sure it gets picked up.
Okay, here we go. If I have to speak
Okay.
more loudly, I'm not screaming at the commissioners, but just trying to raise the volume.
That's great. Thank you. And if you could just start by stating your name for the record, that would be great.
Sure. Ronald Victorio, RA, architect and representative for the owner.
Okay.
Okay. Slides are uploading very slowly. Okay, so S2 is the previously submitted site plan for the development of this 5-acre site at 4500 Arthur Kill Road. And I'm indicating that for record and reference purposes only. Slide 3 is the revised site plan. And on that revised site plan, we have an enlarged view, which were the 4 buildings commented on in the southwest corner of the site. And these 4 buildings here, first we have the outline of the previously located sister house and the proposed new building, showing that the historic view from the current home has not been impeded or reduced. So there is a significant difference from where the porch footprint of the sister house was and the proposed new building. Units 1, 2, 3, and 4 have been relocated southerly towards the private drive, and there has been an increase of 3 feet from the separation of the Kreischer house, thus reducing the original front yard to 15 feet, so it was 18 feet. The orientation of the units has remained the same. This will allow for the minimum social area between the entries of the buildings and also provide a 20-foot quiet space between the backs of the 2 buildings, which is where our bedroom windows and bedrooms are located. There's been a modification to the parking area in which we're providing the installation in the actual parking spaces to be grasscrete. We've removed the shrubbery around the roadway and the parking area to provide less definition of the parking area. The main portion here, the entire gabion wall, which is necessary for the installation of the city sidewalks, we have removed the gabion wall and we are proposing a new hydro-planted geogrid wall, which we will discuss further in upcoming slides. Moving on to S4, slow to advance. This is an enlargement of the courtyard area. Here we have our interior courtyard landscaping, indicating the proposed walkways with brick pavers, non-geometric pattern to the walkways and planting areas. Seasonal planting will be in these planting areas, which will allow for a change of color during the seasons. We have also exterior lighting, benches, trees, and a landscape architect's plan will be provided to the staff during the construction document phase. The main detail on this drawing is the retaining wall at the city sidewalk installation. The proposed geogrid wall with its hydro-applied grasses will be tiered back and will be more historically correct with the grassy knoll originally and historically existing for the mansion. Slide number 6 shows the modifications and an attempt to lower the building heights. What we've done here is we've lowered the parking level or cellar level of the building by 6 inches, thus maintaining the proper slope for the driveway entries with DOB rules and regulations. But we've significantly lowered the slope of the roofs. So the overall reduction at the ridge point is 3 feet 10 inches. The next slide shows actually the longitudinal view and thus reflecting the reduction in ridge heights. Slide number 8 shows the view from the street, the overall reduction of the building heights, thus the relation of the new buildings to the Kreischer House. The Kreischer House will remain the dominant structure with prominence on the hill. Slide number 9 indicates the view from the Kreischer House with the proposed development in the background. S10 is the view from, S10 is the revised view with the geogrid retaining wall. The previous gabion wall and or suggestion of brick wall just didn't match the character of the house. We felt that this was much more historically correct. And trees, please note that the trees and shrubbery have been removed for clarity of the view. S11 is an additional view from Arthur Kill Road looking easterly, showing the unobstructed view of the Kreischer House and also showing the lowering of the buildings and the geogrid wall. S12 is the previously submitted drawing of the restoration and paint schedule for the exterior paint scheme of the historical previously approved finish analysis. And this has been submitted as a sample of the quality of work that our office will prepare for all 4 elevations on the house, porches, decks, and underside of roofs for the repaint. That completes my presentation regarding the comments raised by the commissioners. And at this point, should there be any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Thank you. And we do have a question from Commissioner Goldblum. Go ahead.
Planted wall, geogrid wall, what kind of plantings? Are they evergreen? Will you really be looking, practically speaking, at the geogrid, or will you really be looking at a green mass as you've shown?
I'll go back to the slide with the detail, Commissioner. It might help to delineate. It's a series of bags that are filled with material that would support plant growth. They are stacked very much and very similar to sandbags. And then they are hydraulically sprayed with grasses. It could be a vinca. It could be a series of other elements. We are tiering it back. There would be some fabric put in, utilizing as dead man to hold that weight back, even though we don't really have a surcharge. It's fairly level at the top, and this would be a green wall. I do have a historic photo if you would like to look at that, and you will see that this geogrid wall is very much in keeping with the historical grassy knoll.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions? Any questions? All right, not seeing any other hands raised. I think we can go ahead and move into our discussion. And so as Corey said, and as the applicant said, the last time this was presented, there was a lot of support for it conceptually. And the commission also recognized that most of the new buildings are off of the landmark site, but did ask the applicant to think about them in a sort of a holistic way, and asked the applicant to consider restudying the height of the buildings and their proximity to the main house, the amount of parking area, the material of the retaining wall, and the restoration work. And so the applicant, I believe, has responded to all 4 of those comments today. The roof heights have dropped nearly 4 feet on all of the new buildings, including those off of the landmark site. And they, some of them have been moved further away from the main house, I think by 3 feet. The applicant also noted that the view on whoops, my presentation just disappeared. The one view where the houses off the landmark site are seen in the context of the main house, or are in a location and set further back from the location of an original house. So from that view, that house was always seen in the context of another building. The parking they have addressed by installing grasscrete at the parking area and reducing the sort of formality of the presence by eliminating some of the hedges. The retaining wall, they are now proposing this geogrid green wall that would be more similar to the grassy knoll that was there historically. And they've addressed some of the comments on the paint analysis. So with that, let's go ahead and start the discussion. And I think I'll start with Commissioner.
Sorry, Sarah, do we want to note any testimony?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Did we get any letters?
We did not. There's no testimony for this public meeting item. Just thought we should know for the record.
Okay, it's written comments. Yeah, okay. So Commissioner Gustafson, why don't we start with you as our resident Staten Island Commissioner?
Well, let's start with this. I do want to note the applicant's cooperative approach here. I think we've reached a place that's going to be helpful both to the site from a landmarks point of view, and it's going to give the owner an opportunity to actually make use of the site in a productive way. I think Ron used the word primacy to describe the importance of the landmark, and I think that what he's done here has, in fact, restored that primacy on the site. I particularly appreciate the unique way of figuring out how to lower the height of the buildings by we said 3 to 4 feet, something like that. The geogrid wall sounds like a fantastic idea. I'd like to see how that turns out. Because originally that is how that site was viewed, as a knoll, a green knoll, and replacing Gabion wall with that is a terrific idea. I would also note that this is I think it is a win-win. The 74-711 will with its cyclical maintenance plan is going to give some permanence to a structure that has had its ups and downs over the course of its life, and I'm happy to see that it will be maintained in a first-class condition. So I'm completely in favor.
Okay, thank you. So Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree with John. I think I particularly like the opening. I don't know what direction it is, but the knoll is quite beautiful. So I agree with John.
Commissioner Lutfi.
I agree as well. I think there have been a lot of improvements made here in all the areas we've discussed. Visibility, the height, the parking, and I also love that grasscrete addition.
Okay, Commissioner Bland.
I think John and others have said it all, and I'm in agreement with what they've said. So I think this is a big achievement.
All right, great. Commissioner Chen.
I'm in agreement with all the commissioners. It's also good to hear the grassy knoll being referred in a positive context rather than the dollar site.
Okay. Commissioner Devonshire.
I'm in favor. Thank you.
Okay, and Commissioner Goldblum.
I'm in favor, but I really think they should have gone further. They could have added screening trees to further obscure the houses, which we discussed at the last meeting. They could have lowered the roofs further, both of which would have made this a better application, but I think it's acceptable.
Okay, and Commissioner Chapin.
I can accept it as presented.
And Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yeah, I agree. I find it acceptable.
Okay, all right. So I think that we have a consensus to approve. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you read the motions? Do you mind reading both of them?
First.
I think that they're ordered to do the 74-711 first.
Okay.
I think either one would be okay though.
Okay.
I think that it makes actually just, John, it does make sense to do the C of A first. I'm sorry to switch that order, but I think that just makes more sense.
Okay. In the matter of LPC 1914-497, 4500 Arthur Kill Road, the Kreischer House, a stick-style residence designed by Palliser & Palliser and built approximately 1888. Application is to install a barrier-free access lift and to construct new buildings situated on the landmark site. I note that this work is being proposed in conjunction with an application requesting that the Landmarks Preservation Commission issue a report to the City Planning Commission relating to an application for a modification of use pursuant to section 74-711 of the zoning resolution. I further note that the site historically had two matching houses, one of which has since been demolished, and three small ancillary structures which have since been or will be demolished as part of this proposal. I recommend approval, noting that the construction of multiple new buildings on portions of the landmark site and the adjoining site are arranged in a manner that limits their visual and spatial impact on the individual landmark, and their design, scale, and configuration take advantage of the site's topography and wooded areas and maintain a wide open expanse around the front of the building. That the footprints of many of the new buildings are off the landmark site or only encroach modestly onto it and have been situated to have minimal visual impact on the individual landmark. That the new buildings that are situated fully on the landmark site have been located near the eastern edge at a much lower grade, so that the individual landmark maintains its prominence when viewed from many locations along Arthur Kill Road. That while the westernmost new buildings will effectively block the view of the individual landmark from Arthur Kill Road from the southwest, this view was not historically open, as it was the site of the now demolished second summer house. That the individual landmark retains its prominence due to the lower height and varied and simpler massing of the proposed new buildings. That the design of the new buildings, featuring hipped roofs, dormers, porches, and architectural elements similar to those of the individual landmark, will recall and harmonize with the historic building without replicating it, and will add architectural interest to the new buildings. That the proposed modern facade materials of the new buildings, consisting of hardy plank and architectural asphalt shingles, will recall the appearance of traditional materials in terms of their details, texture, scale, and finish, and that the color palette will be simpler and more subdued than that of the landmark. That the installation of solar panels on the south-facing roofs of the new buildings on the landmark site will be only minimally visible from limited vantage points from Arthur Kill Road and will blend in with the varied roofscape of the buildings. That the proposed parking areas and access roads will conform to DOT standards and have been situated away from the individual landmark in many locations, and having sufficient parking is critical to supporting an adaptive reuse of the historic building. That the proposed modest excavation of parts of the hillside and installation of retaining walls covered with plant growth along the northern and eastern perimeter of the site to create a public sidewalk along Arthur Kill Road and improve vehicular safety will have a minimal visual impact on the individual landmark. And that the barrier-free lift at the individual landmark house will be located at a secondary facade, and its installation will not obscure or cause damage to any significant architectural features of the building.
All right, and Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, Rich, will you call the vote?
Yes, Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafsson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor, none opposed, that motion carries.
All right, thank you. John, will you make the second motion?
In the matter of LPC 20-01986, 4500 Arthur Kill Road, the Kreischer House, a stick-style residence designed by Palliser and Palliser and built circa 1888. Application is to request that the Landmarks Preservation Commission issue a report to the City Planning Commission relating to an application for a modification of use pursuant to Section 74-711 of the zoning resolution. I recommend approval, noting that the restorative work pursuant to application LPC 20-01988 will help return the building closer to its original appearance and will aid in the long-term preservation of the building. The restorative work will bring the building up to a sound first-class condition and aid in its long-term preservation. That the implementation of a cyclical maintenance plan will ensure the continued maintenance of the building in a sound first-class condition, and that the owners of the designated building have committed themselves to establishing a perpetual cyclical maintenance plan that will be legally enforceable by the Landmarks Preservation Commission under the provisions of a restrictive declaration, which will bind all heirs, successors, assigns, and subsequent owners of the building, and which will be recorded at the New York County Registrar's Office.
Okay, and Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second that motion.
Okay, Rich, will you call the vote?
If I can just jump in real quickly, sorry, we're also, that may change to be recorded in the Staten Island Land Office, just for clarity, that last motion.
Thank you.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafsson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Okay, 10 in favor, none opposed, that motion carries.
Okay, so that is approved, and good luck with that application. And thank you all for dedicating your time and working so hard today. We had a very good, robust day, and we are, I think, going to be very caught up with our schedules going forward. So thank you all, and have a great day, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Next
Thank
Friday,
you.
Weekend, everyone.
not happening then.
Have a great week.
Let's